Colourful Radio. In the background, it's the wonderful sounds of Mr. John Holt, and the track is called Stick By Me, some lovely reggae. So earlier on I did say to you that I'll be in conversation with Sonita Gale. She's a writer, director and producer, and also the founder of Gale Force Films. And she has written, directed and produced a feature documentary called Hostile, and this is an award-winning feature-length documentary, and the film focuses on the UK's complicated relationship with migrant communities, and the film reveals the impact of the evolving hostile environment, a term that was used by the UK government in 2012. Good morning, Sonita. How are you today?
Morning. I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's okay. It's my pleasure. The first thing I wanted to ask, because there aren't many women in the space that you're occupying, how did you get into the world of documentary making and filmmaking?
Yeah, I guess you're right. I think around 3% of directors in the UK are women. I believe that figure is correct. So, yeah, I mean, I got into documentary filmmaking later on in life. You know, I'm 47 years old. I'm a mom of 2 teenagers. And really storytelling came to me at the sort of middle of my life, really, at the age of 45. I decided, because of the pandemic and what I saw because of the pandemic, I really wanted to turn my hand to directing and storytelling. I'd previously produced a couple of things, but I'd never taken the seat of a director. And I guess it was the pandemic really that was the catalyst that made me want to go out there and to film and to direct my debut film.
That is amazing, because some people would have the idea, but would be too scared to actually pursue it. So, you know, that is definitely amazing. It's definitely a great achievement.
Thank you.
Yeah. And in terms of, I noticed that Nitin Swaney is one of the producers. I was curious, how did you get him on board for this documentary?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with Nitin, you know, he was an interviewee to begin with. You know, I contacted him because of his because of his belief system, because of what he speaks about migrant communities, and also his music speaks to migrant audiences about migrant communities, and his own history with his parents migrating here in the 60s, and his storytelling as an artist and a musician reveals that. And so I guess initially I contacted Nitin to be a participant in the film and to interview and to speak of those stories that he's either witnessed or experienced himself, and the knowledge that he has. And when I met him at his studio and we shot the interview there, I then got to film him, and then we got to talk, and then I got to listen to his music in studio. And then I realized actually that his music would be a really important feature in the documentary. I'd had a relationship with his PA before, and we'd kept in contact. And it was at that moment really, which was quite early on in the process, I wanted Nitin not only to be an interviewee, but I also wanted his music in the film, which I have. And then after forming a kind of relationship with him and his team, I asked him kind of in the post-production whether he would come on board as exec producer. For me, it just made sense. You know, our lives are pretty similar in terms of our heritage. Our journeys, similar. I mean, he's a musician, I'm a director. We're both in the world of arts, and we both speak to our communities and about our stories. So for me to have Nitin on board as an exec producer was just something that felt so natural. And it's been just an absolute honor, because he's helped me so much on my journey, with doing Q&As and being there for me in terms of the music, but also in terms of, being on tour with me with my Q&A. So it's been incredible actually to have him.
That's great. And in terms of from the initial idea of the documentary to getting it off the ground to it finally being on the screen, how long was that process?
Yeah, so the idea came to me in kind of March 2020, and I delivered the film in September 2021. So I think in total it was about 18 months. Okay. 18 months, 19 months. So it's kind of, that journey from like prep, production to post took that long. And it was pretty intense and pretty difficult, right? Because I'm making my film in a global pandemic, and I'm making an important story about human rights and the hostile environment. So it was, for me, it was a process that was intense, and I was happy that I did it in such a short-ish period of time. in relation to how long documentary films can take.
That's very true. And the other question I wanted to ask is that the documentary is based on the UK's hostile environment. For those that don't know, can you explain a little bit more about what that hostile environment means?
Yeah, so I guess the hostile environment is a very real thing. And, you know, hostile environments in this aspect in my film is relatable to government policy and legislation and human rights, and effectively how migrants are treated when they're here, when they're coming here, whether they're born here or not. It's to do with the paperwork and legislation that goes into the policies around whether they can stay or whether they can leave, whether they have certain visas or whether they don't, whether they have a British passport, whether they don't, whether they have indefinite leave to remain or limited leave to remain, whether they have a tier 1 visa or a tier 4 visa. And all of those Webber policies are related to that. And the restrictions around that bring about things like no recourse to public funds, where if you're a migrant living here and you're working here, you can't access universal credit. You can't access disability allowance. So in the global pandemic, you don't have these resources and you've lost your job. You're really left on your own to survive. So the hostile environment is a web of policies that covers all of that, really. And scooped up in that was the Windrush scandal, which happened to the Windrush generation. Scooped up in that, it happened to highly skilled migrants when there was an issue with them and their visa restrictions many years ago. Scooped up into that is international students. Scooped up into that is the asylum seekers and refugees. And so those hostile environment policies affect our migrant communities. But what I found in my film was that this hostile environment wasn't just limited to them. It started to really seep throughout society, where bills were being passed that were going to affect the rights of all of us. So hostile environments are now affecting all human rights and expanding rapidly and fast. And that's what my film addressed, that actually you might think hostile environment policies affect Black and brown communities and migrant communities, but wake up. They're affecting us all, white, Black or brown.
Exactly. And who were some of the people that you interviewed for this documentary?
Yeah, I mean, I think my 4 major participants were Anthony Bryan, subject to the hostile environment. There was a drama made about him called Sitting in Limbo, came here during the Windrush generation, only to find out 5 decades later that they lost his identity. His landing cards were destroyed. He was subject to the hostile environment. Farouk Sair, his story was covered by May Borman in The Independent. He came here in 2003 as an international student, wanted to live here, wanted to have a normal life here. Has taken him all these years to overcome the visa issues that he's had. And because of the film and the press he's had, he's just got indefinite leave to remain, now £80,000 in debt.
Wow. The
international students that came here to study here worked 20 hours a week, paid for their education to the tune of £20,000 to £25,000 a year. When the pandemic struck, what revealed itself with the hostile environment is that they had no recourse to public funds. The universities closed down. They couldn't get any work. They had nowhere to go. So they were left destitute and alone, relying on food banks. And then the other participants are Daksha and Paresh, who operated a food bank during the height of the pandemic, helping those not only suffering from the hostile environment, but all communities. But what they revealed to me was how difficult it was for those that suffer from the hostile environment to survive in a global pandemic, where they were providing food to them. And we're talking about people that are NHS workers. We're talking about students. We're talking about working everyday people that couldn't afford to put food on the table. So they really show the effects of the hostile environment where poverty kicks in.
Yeah, it's crazy. And for people watching the film, what is it that you want them to take from it? And also, I watched the preview and it's like, what can I do to help? So 2 questions. What do you want people to take away from it? And what can people do? Because I know there's always lots of policies that, you know, the layman doesn't know about. But so what can the normal man or woman on the street do to help?
Well, I think one thing I want to take people to take away from it is more empathy, more love, more support for those people that are here or people that are coming here, that they're not here because they want to be here. A lot of people are fleeing persecution, famine, death, just just unbelievable situations which are unbearable, to have more love and empathy and support, and to think that, you know, that person that gave you your vaccine this morning is probably subject to the hostile environment. So a more kinder and compassionate society, for us to understand that there are people suffering, and also for people to take away that we have more in common than separates us: black, white and brown, working class, middle class, upper class. What unites us as a society? What people can do is, at the end of the film, we end with hope that actually we can collectively as communities fight against this hostile environment and overturn policies. So I want people to peacefully go out there and protest when can, to write to their local MP and talk about how their local community and local people within their community is suffering from hostile policies, and for people to take their own action themselves, positive action, join an organization that helps people that are suffering from hostile policies, maybe join a food bank, help out within the local church that helps people that are suffering from hostile policies. It's like where to go to, where they can help, and just have your ears and eyes open, you know. Wake up that these policies are happening. They're very real. They're affecting human lives, and they might be affecting, as I say, that taxi driver you got into a taxi this morning, that GP that saved your life, that doctor that gave you that vaccine. They are very real people. Anthony Bryan was a painter and decorator for decades in Kensington and Chelsea. The number of wealthy people's houses he painted, but no one knew what this guy was going through. And yet if they knew, they might have had more compassion to the man that painted their house. And it's having that perspective now on life, that actually people are suffering, and we need to wake up to that suffering and not allow this current government to do what they're doing to our humanity. And we are Great Britain, and we are proud of our country, as inclusive as we are. Let's not divide us further by allowing these hostile policies to penetrate throughout our society, and for us to be part of that rhetoric and racism, and for us to collectively fight back peacefully against that. So it's about coming together as communities and seeing our similarities and setting aside our differences. That's what I want for Hostile, and that's what we're doing with the film.
Oh, it's definitely a good way to, one, get the message across, show people what's happening, and thank you definitely for giving the details of how people can get involved. And in terms of the documentary, how can people watch the documentary? Are there any screenings coming up, or do people sign up and get information when that's going to be happening?
Yeah, you can go on our website, which is www.hostiledocumentary.com, and you can follow us at hostiledoc on Instagram and Twitter. So that's where you can find information about the film. If you've got membership with the BFI, you can watch it on the BFI player. We're just selling the film now in different countries across the world, but I am still on tour. The film was in cinemas from January 2022, and it's continuing to be now on an impact campaign tour, where we're going into grassroots community centres, organisations, and really speaking to communities across the country. So if you go on our website, you'll see where those screenings are, and please do come along. You know, we are running a very powerful, important and positive campaign. And we're looking for people from all communities to join that campaign, from any community. So please do come along and join us.
No, it's definitely a powerful documentary. So I just want to say thank you for sharing to the Colourful Radio listeners about the documentary and what it's all about. And last question, in terms of, you were nominated, has you've been nominated for a BAFTA. Has that passed? Did you win, or is that coming up in the future?
Oh no, it was last year actually. I was longlisted. It was actually this year, but it was in February, March. So I was longlisted. So I got down to the last 10, nomination 5. But for me to get to the last 10 of the British Independent Film Awards and BAFTAs, I was so grateful.
Yes.
I'm so appreciative. Being a woman of colour telling stories of black and brown and white struggle from communities that I grew up in, I'm just so appreciative.
And your first documentary.
And to BIFA.
Yeah.
And now I'm a BAFTA member and now voting on the BIFAs.
Excellent.
And so no, I didn't win. but there was a message in there that actually the film industry cared.
That's
so
good.
For me, that was the most powerful thing. And I'm so grateful and continue to be grateful.
That is amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to me and share with the listeners all about the documentary. So the documentary is called Hostile, and people can sign up. Give the listeners again the website that they can sign up to for more details.
It's www.hostiledocumentary.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time out, and I look forward to the listeners catching the screenings.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Colourful.